Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening for those who are watching in Indonesia and good morning for those watching in United States. My name is Eki Imanjaya. Welcome to Madani International Film Festival. And today we will discuss about cinema and Muslim cultures in film studies discourse, and we will discuss about two edit collections edited by Dr. Christian Petersen from Old Dominion University, and he's here right now with us. Thank you for your participation, Dr. Petersen. And this event is a collaboration between Binus University, Film Department at Binus University, and Madani International Film Festival. My name is Eki Imanjaya, for those who doesn't know about me, and I am the board of Madani Film Festival as well as the film lecturer at Binus University in Jakarta. And today we are focusing on two books edited by Dr. Christian Petersen. The first one is Muslims in the Movies, a global anthology published by ILEX Foundation and Harvard University Press last year. And at the same time, in 2021, Dr. Petersen also published, edited another book titled New Approaches to Islam in Film. Before we start to discuss, I will read the Dr. Petersen's biodata. Dr. Christian Petersen is an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Old Dominion University. He specializes on two main areas of research, including Muslims in cinema. He is the editor of the edited volumes Muslims in the Movie, a global anthology, and New Approaches to Film in Islam in Film. Both were published in 2021 in the series, and the New Approaches to Islam in Film is part of the series Routledge Studies in Religion and Film. He is currently working on a monograph entitled The Cinematic Lives of Muslims. Please welcome Dr. Christian Petersen. Hello, can I call you Christian? So,
yes, please. Yeah, thank you for
okay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Good morning. Yes, in morning, right? In your
yes, it's morning here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your willingness to join this discussion in Madani Film Festival.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering. Yeah, my first question would be, why are you interested in research topic on Muslims and cinema? Because you are a faculty member at the Philosophy and Religious Studies, yeah. But
yeah,
why specifically cinema and Muslim and cinema? So,
sure. Yeah. So you know, I'm an Islamicist by training. So my PhD was actually in Near and Middle East Studies, but it was an interdisciplinary degree, and my research was on Muslims in China. And really, my first book, Interpreting Islam in China, is like an intellectual history of Chinese language, Islamic texts that use Buddhist and Taoist and Confucian terminology to translate technical vocabulary from Persian and Arabic Islamic texts. So it's like very different, very niche, kind of more narrow topic. So that was kind of my interest. And then, of course, you know, through graduate school, you get trained in kind of broader Islamic intellectual history and social history and these kind of things. And as I started teaching in my first job, I was at a small liberal arts college, and we had these kind of like cool little classes. And I started offering a religion and film course. And religion and film within the discipline of religious studies is a fairly well-developed kind of subfield. There's a journal called the Journal of Religion and Film, which is an open access journal that's been around for decades. I'm currently the book review editor over there. But once I started to kind of develop this course, I was kind of aware of this idea of religion in film. But once I started looking at the scholarship, I found that the vast majority of it was focused on a kind of a Christian context, either thinking about like Jesus films, for example, or other films about biblical prophets like Moses or something like this. So that was kind of one strong thread in this scholarship. The other thing that seemed to happen a lot was kind of like almost like a pseudo theological interpretation of, like, let's say a popular film, like any kind of film, like RoboCop or Back to the Future, and then they would like use a kind of pseudo theological type of understanding. This means this, or this means forgiveness or redemption, or these kind of things. And so that was kind of like the bulk of the scholarship. And as somebody who was interested in Islamic studies, and as somebody who's works in China specifically, and kind of Asia more broadly, those weren't really the things I was particularly interested in teaching. So as I started to kind of think about, what other topics can we include here, where does Islam fit into this? The kind of scholarship at the time, and this is like 15 years ago or so, the scholarship on Muslims in film was largely focused on, and rightly so, here's this terrible history of these kind of stereotypical images of Muslims and all the kind of bad tropes that we have. So I'm thinking, of somebody like Jack Shaheen, who is the kind of main scholar in this. If people are interested in looking at that, he's got a book called Real Bad Arabs, and REEL, as in like a film reel. And then it was kind of made into a documentary, which people can pull up on YouTube, which is really informative. And, all of that scholarship is extremely important, very valuable. But it's also like a real downer. I was like, I don't want to spend like a couple weeks talking about Muslims in film and just say, like, here's all this like terrible, Hollywood cinema that, paints Muslims as terrorists or as oppressive or these kind of things. So it was really hard to kind of find at the moment scholarship that was thinking about Muslims in a more comprehensive way, or thinking about Muslim filmmakers themselves and how they are, defining and expressing their own vision of the world. So when I tried to kind of like seek that out, where it seemed to be happening, and this is probably much more familiar to you than me, so you can hopefully back me up on this. But it seemed that in film scholarship and in cinema studies, much of things that we might think of as Muslim cinema, is kind of the terminology I'm using, is happening in kind of a national cinema type of scholarship. So like focused on Iranian cinema or Turkish cinema or Egyptian cinema or Indonesian cinema or whatever. And so I started to kind of explore that scholarship, and I found that not always, and it's certainly, I think, gotten better, but many of those people were not interested in questions of religion. So, if they're dealing with Iranian cinema or they're dealing with Egyptian cinema, there's all sorts of other things that they want to explore, and like the role of Islam in shaping the vision of the world, the ethics of the character, how an audience might interpret, certain signifiers, wasn't really a focal point. So I kind of found like these two kind of sub disciplines not really doing what I was hoping would happen. In thinking about the role of Muslims in film and the role of Muslim filmmakers. So, I'm not trying to claim that I'm the person who's like kind of leading the charge here, but, I was interested in thinking about these kind of questions. And so that was kind of the motivating factor in like teaching. It really started in teaching. And, since there was not a lot of this, I started to write, an article here and there about these kind of things. And and that kind of snowballed into developing these book projects, because I started to find people that were not necessarily writing a whole book on the subject, but they, are interested in this angle, right? Or they're interested in this set of films, or they're interested in this director as a key study or something like this. So I started to kind of come across these folks, and at a certain point, it made sense to try to bring these together. So that was kind of the catalyst for these book projects. And basically, I kind of wrote up a call for papers, sent it out, and I got like tons and tons of responses. And initially, I really just imagined one book. It initially started with this book with Ilex, which was part of something called the Maidan website at the time. So Michael Pergil was running this at the time, and they had just in this same series with Harvard that they were working with, they had put out the first book in their series, which was on Muslims in comics. And so I was talking to Michael, and we had talked about Muslims in film before, and he said, this would, seems like a no-brainer. We could just, instead of Muslims in comics, we could do Muslims in film. And so that kind of, I was like, okay, yeah, let's see if we can do this. And so I got tons of people. I had to really like sift through. I got like 100 proposals, and right, as you know, you can't fit that many in a book.
Yeah.
So as I tried to sift through those, it kind of naturally came together where there was a set of essays that were more thematic and more kind of introductory in nature. And so that's kind of what the Muslims in the Movies books turned into. Was these were the essays that I thought would be a best introduction, for somebody like you who's like well versed in your subdiscipline, but perhaps you're not familiar with what's going on in Nigeria, or don't know what's going on in Australia. And so it's the idea of the Muslims in the Movie book is that anybody could pick this up, or you could use it in a classroom, and it's gonna easily thread in with broader topics, right? And then there's these kind of case studies from different regional or national contexts. The other book kind of there was a lot of essays that were just excellent, but they were just way too niche and way too focused and kind of technical. So the Rutledge series on religion and film was kind of best suited for this, because they're already doing that kind of more focused scholarship. So the New Approaches book was the kind of intent was to bring together these kind of really exciting essays and kind of put them together in kind of prompting perhaps new avenues in a couple different ways. And we can go into that if you want to, but that's kind of like how I got interested, and then how that kind of led to the book. So it was all kind of organic, really.
So I'm just wondering, was there any conference or special edition in a journal on Muslims and cinema before? Like,
there might have been. I'm not totally sure. I can't recall any off the top of my head, but there's certainly like other people that's works that's been really important. Another person for me who's been really important is Evelyn El Sultani, who's in California now, and she has a book. Drawing a blank on the title, but it's Arab and Muslim Representation in U.S. Media or something like that. And this one's also really good. It kind of builds upon Jack Shaheen's scholarship on kind of the history of Hollywood cinema, and it looks at kind of some of the transitions that happen in a post 9/11 kind of North American media context. And one of the things that I really find very valuable from her work is she talks about, or she developed this idea of what she calls simplified complex representation. And the idea is, and you might already be aware of this one, but she basically says that after 9/11, many might assume that there would be these kind of a kind of plethora of negative representations of Muslims that are coming out, which there were. So, there's lots of television programs and lots of movies that kind of perpetuated these stereotypes. But there was also this attempt to kind of bring in, quote unquote, positive representations. And, for a lot of people, this seems like a great thing. Like, why wouldn't we want that? But what El-Sultani shows through this simplified complex representation is that, when what makes a Muslim character in these kind of post 9/11 media contexts positive is all rooted in kind of questions of national security, questions of Islamophobia. So it's they're either helping to find the terrorist, to defeat the terrorist, or they're victims of the terrorist. And again, this is like, I really appreciate her work as a kind of advancement in thinking about these kind of this negative history. But again, I was interested in kind of the flip side. So like, how do we then think about Muslims as like regular folks, or like, the hero, or in a fantasy, or in a rom-com, or these kind of things. And, part of it was there, at least in a kind of North American context, there really wasn't much of this happening until recently.
And by looking at the table of contents, I see there like the topics are very wide, and it involves so many perspective and from so many disciplinary, interdisciplinary. I mean, you are from religious philosophy and religious study, and I there are two person talking about Indonesian cinema. Alicia Izharuddin is more into gender studies, and then Thomas Barker is graduated from sociology. So it's like so many angles, so many multidisciplinary approaches happening in the when we analyze the relationship between the movies and Muslim cultures, and that's will enrich the enrich the book and enrich the topic.
I hope so. That was the goal, because as I said, it seemed like different disciplines were approaching this kind of topic in a multitude of ways. So in both books, I try to include people that are coming from media studies or from cinema studies, more particularly, in addition to people that are coming from a religious studies background, or elsewhere. So other people, are sociologists, some are kind of literary studies people. But I was trying to get a kind of broad perspective. And I wonder, do you find this talking to, people talking about Indonesian cinema from a different disciplinary context? Do you find that there are differences in the kind of types of questions that they're interested in?
Regarding Indonesian cinema and Muslim representation, there are many kind of approaches and topics, from gender to anti-radicalization and anti-terrorism or something. So they are, But if I when I did the research in film philosophy conference, for example, there are some papers discussing a very philosophical, like Mulah Sadra and something like this, like wow, it's like,
Ibn Arabi and or something like that.
Like the philosophy and and relate the topic with Al-Farabi, the classic philosopher, Muslim philosopher, that it's possible. Okay, everything. Okay, and one of the, I don't know, is it the problem or the phenomenon in Indonesia when we talk about Islamic theme or films or Islamic films, we also discuss about the definition. So this is not Islamic film, this is Islamic. So do you also have your own definition of Islamic theme film or Islamic film, or like prophetic film, or any kind, or do you want to avoid to have definition and just analyze the phenomenon or something like that. Just
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's kind of part of what I'm trying to figure out, right? Because part of it is like, well, if we're going to think about Muslims in film, like what exactly are we talking about? And like these, like a terrorist Hollywood movie is not really like, I don't think of that as like Muslims in film in a real kind of meaningful way. So how do we kind of focus in and think about that? And it does seem from my very small knowledge about Indonesian film or Southeast Asian film in general, is it does seem like there is a very a kind of narrow and specific definition, at least perhaps in the industry and among audiences, about this film Islami. And it sounds like your kind of use or expansion of this category seems similar to kind of how I'm conceptualizing it as well. So I'm kind of advocating for the idea of Muslim cinema, right? Like this idea of Muslim cinema as a category. And for me, what that means is that this is film that's informed by interpretations of Islam, either in the production or in the consumption of those films. So it's so this isn't a static definition. So the way Islam is narrated happens in a multitude of ways. It's going to be different in Indonesia compared to Iran, compared to Morocco, compared to France or wherever. But really, the way I understand, or the kind of argument I'm making about Muslim cinema, is that interpretations of Islam shape narratives, shape filmmakers, shape audiences. And that's going to be different in different contexts. So in Muslim majority society like Indonesia, right, things that are going to be just normal, right? They might not, signify Islam to a Muslim viewer in the same way that if somebody from Western Europe or from Canada is watching that film, they might signify different things. But for me, even if it's not, I'm going to make a Muslim film, it's how does Islam as a kind of worldview and a kind of ethical everyday practice inform those filmic worlds. So like I'm thinking like the Iranian director Majid Majidi, who has all of these beautiful films that are just about regular people, right? They're about like kids in life. They're about, someone who's disabled and navigating life, but they're very much informed by a kind of ethical worldview that is rooted in Islam. And that, that might be different than even people within Iran, right? Other people in Iran might say this isn't really what, Islam should be. But for me, I don't, as kind of like an outsider, as an analyst, as a researcher, I'm not really concerned in kind of like asserting that this is what Islamic film is, or this is what Muslim cinema is. But kind of teasing it out, like, how does Islam inform this film? What might be the kind of potential interpretations that audiences have based on this kind of framework or narrative, or even kind of like the visuals, right? Like the clothing, the backgrounds, the setting, the architecture, all of these kind of things. So for me, that's the kind of stuff that I'm most interested in. And so, the long-term project is kind of think about this cross-culturally. So to think about this idea of Muslim cinema and see kind of what are the parallels if we look at somewhere like Indonesia and compare it to Nigeria and to Turkey, right? What are the specificities of these local contexts, and how do those kind of local interpretations of Islam kind of inform that? So that's the goal. That's kind of how I'm using it. Some people might reject that idea of like a Muslim cinema, but I think as long as you're not trying to say that it's this kind of static boundary, right, that these are the particular points, but rather that it's this kind of almost like like Islam is kind of like the center peg, right, and then it can be anywhere around that kind of in that constellation of variables that inform it. So, but yes, can you tell? I would love to hear about because you're using this term Maidani film, right?
Madani, yeah.
Yeah. So
Bec-
I'd love to hear more about that. How to use that and kind of define that.
It started from, Madani Film Festival was started in 2018. But before that, in 2009, there was Jakarta International Film Festival, and Madani was one of the programs Madani. So what we for us, Madani means the representation of Muslim cultures or living Islam. So it's not about Islam the doctrine, but Islam the culture or the people. So our tagline is celebrating Muslim diversity. So that's why we need to know how people in Nigeria, apply the Islamic, Islamic teachings culturally. So it's like the Muslim cultures, because it's very interesting when I see, for example, when I watch Iranian films and so on, like, or in Malaysia, and it's a bit different of what we have here, something like that. And regarding the definition, it's quite interesting for me when I found out, for example, Alicia Izaruddin excluded Yasmin Ahmad films, for example, in the discourses. But myself and Madani Film Festival in general, we include Yasin Ahmad films, transgender filmmakers from Malaysia, the late Yasin Ahmad, and for example, when I was invited in Halloween, for those who doesn't know, Halloween is a celebration for the relationship between horror and Muslim world, yeah. And they will screen Satan Slave, by Joko Anwar, and then I just that made me thinking, they consider Satan Slave as Muslim films or something like that. Oh, that's interesting.
Right, yeah.
They have different kind of perspective, and as well as Roh from from Malaysia. Okay, because so it's interesting because the living Islam, the Muslim cultures are diverse, and the perspective of what we call Muslim films or Islamic films also diverse, and that's okay for me, because that's why we celebrate films from all over the world, and from the classic one we screen, for example, Mandabi, and from Senegal, I think, that's directed by the father of Senegal films, if I'm not mistaken. And that's interesting. That's why you are here, because we thought that you are in line in the same spirit with Madani Film Festival.
I'm in spirit with you, Eki. Yeah, I like that. Forgive my ignorance. Is there like a literal translation for that word?
So
does it mean lived, or
Madani? It's the roots. It's din, 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 and then we have the din, and Medina is city, the civilization, or tamadun the civilization. So and we also reverse our term with the civil society in Malaysia. The one of the big figures in Malaysia, he first coined the term civil society as masyarakat madani. Madani means civilized, So from that, that's, and then so civil society is a very important term back in the 90s, and then Nurkolis Majid, Professor Dr. Nurkolis Majid, almarhum, he also coined the term, the masyarakat Madani as a civil society. So Madani is also has a strong relation with Din. Yeah, Din is the way of life, as well as the Medina, or the city as the center of civilization, and as well as Tamadun. In Malaysia, they have it's the similar term, yeah, Tamadun or something. So it's like cultural Islam. Cultural Islam. It's not the political Islam, but it's more into cultural. So I translated the term in a book, yeah, in 2019. It's called Finding Madani Films. So the cinema and Muslims. Finding the title Finding is tricky, because if people say this is not Islamic, yeah, we are trying, we are finding, we are formulating, yeah, we are still, so it's a verb, it's not a noun, so we are still looking what is it about. And then this year on Saturday, myself and Hikmat Darmawan will publish, it's called 99 Madani films, because we want to make sure that, and also do the mapping. For example, we want to watch what have we done to deserve it. Have you watched the Austrian film? It's a very, very funny film. And you can watch in this OTT or in Netflix or something. So it's like, because in here we want to try that. We want to do the mapping, like for example, like Yakin Ahmad films, you can watch 3 of them in Netflix or something, and so on and so on. So
that's great.
I hope.
Congrats.
Thank you. I hope the term Madani will enrich the the existing discourse on Muslim cinema or Islamic films.
I think that's I think that's great.
And I think Halloween is very interesting for me, because most of people, particularly in Indonesia, if we think about films and Muslim culture, usually they think about drama or art house movies, like Iranian films. But Halloween, they destroy the stereotypes, and we can have popular genre films, like as a Muslim films or as Madani films or comedy, because you also in your book there is an article about Muslim representation in Italian comedy, if I'm not mistaken, and then and one article about horror. A girl walks home alone at night. Yeah, it's like half Western, half vampire, and that's nice, because we should include as many genre, as many types of films as we can. So what do you think about the stereotype, like Muslim films should be art house films, or drama, or because people are more into like Turkish films, or Majid Majidi, or Jafar Panahi. And this interesting, because when I had interview with Jafar Panahi when he visited Jakarta in 2002 for Jakarta International Film Festival, and I asked him personally, like in person, like, do you consider your film as Muslim film? And he said, no way. And then, okay, I just made movies. I don't think like something like that. So it's like, it's us, the scholars, the film critics who define, or for me, or define or formulate. So the works were there, and then the theories came after. I think
I think you're right, and I think it kind of highlights an interesting point, because this whole idea of like the intention of the author, right, and how do we account for kind of filmmakers' intent. And I found that as well. I haven't spoken to anyone as famous as him, but in the filmmakers that I've talked to, there's kind of this tension between, yes, of course, I want to represent Muslims, and I want to speak about, our particular culture or like this particular story. But like, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, like, so it's, kind of, it almost seems that it's dependent on context, in the sense of like, which one of these identities should we prioritize in a particular context. And I think in a kind of North American, or in a European context, where or even maybe in a place like Australia, where Muslims are minorities within the general population, and there's a kind of just kind of a ground level of anti-Muslim sentiment. That kind of context is going to make people want to respond in particular ways. Whereas in a place like Indonesia, perhaps, where I'm sure there's some tensions, but probably not a lot related to like suspicion about Muslims. So in that context, people might want to say, well, I just want to make stories, right? I just want to tell, about this perspective, I'm not trying to represent Muslims, but because of the kind of saturation of the filmmaker, the actors, the stories within an Islamic context, from my perspective, and again, yeah, you're right, like as a scholar, from an outsider's perspective, it seems inevitable that that product would be informed by Islam, whether the author is trying to say, oh, I want to tell a Muslim story, right? Or if they just want to say, I want to just tell a story about my community, my context, my past, my future. So I think that context makes a big difference. And then also that I think kind of helps emerge where these definitions come from. So like thinking about the types of work that Alicia was focused in her book, right, which was much more narrow. It seems to come from a kind of industry definition of what Islamic film should be, rather than a kind of more robust one that I think you and I are trying to advocate for. So in a kind of an industry context where sales and financing and these kind of things are going to be part of the equation, it seems that they're going to define it in different ways, because based on their own self-interest. So it seems like there is always going to be this kind of back and forth between, is this a Muslim film or is this just a film? But I think it's a really important question. And yeah, the horror stuff is great, because I think it also kind of gets at this question of like what makes Muslim film, or what makes Maidani film, in the sense of like what makes Muslim horror. Is it Muslim horror, or is it just Muslims in horror? Right, as a kind of distinction. And like if it's a it sounds like you know better than I, but there's like a genre of like jinn possession movies.
Yes.
So like, is that just by the very fact that this emerges from Muslim cultures, does that make it Muslim horror? Even if there's like not other kind of explicit type of religious content, or and in horror studies more general, it seems that there's there might be Turkish horror, or there might be Southeast Asian horror. Those seem to be kind of very recognizable global context. But horror constructed out of a Muslim kind of ethos still seems to be questioned. And I wonder if it is because of the kind of the assumptions about what good art is, right? Quote unquote good art, in the sense that it should be drama, or it should be focused on these kind of serious topics. And I'm sure I actually wanted to ask you, if you don't mind talking about it, in your kind of research on what we would probably call B films, kind of not mainstream, like films that aren't necessarily taken seriously as art. You know, perhaps similar things are happening with, you know, thinking of like Muslim cinema in that context, but because it's not, you know, a drama, it's not going up for awards,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
discredited perhaps. So, you know, I know this wasn't like the focus of your work on that kind of genre of film, but do you see kind of visible marks? Like, can we think of this kind of subgenre as Maidani film from your, you know, viewing of a lot of it?
yeah. Actually, I'm preparing for Halloween because I was invited. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to formulate, you know, because one of the criteria of Madani films is the film should depict uh, the specific problems of Muslims, for example, like Hajj, or you know, something like that, or you know, for example, relationship between father and son, and you know, and then something related to Muslim problems. Yeah,
Right.
so that's why I quite wondering about the Satan slave
Yeah.
to be put. Yeah, but related to that, I did the I'm doing actually the research, like there are particular three subgenres, yeah, related to Muslim cultures. The first is it's happening now, as it's trending in Indonesia. It's called ruqyah subgenre, or you know, exorcism, Islamic exorcism.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you,
Okay.
if you know dabe in the process, for those who haven't watched, please watch it on Netflix, yeah. But the dabe, the possession is the scariest dabe, DABBE. It's about you know, how to get rid of the jinn from the body with you know, with the Islamic chanting, you know, the Quran and so on.
Right.
So dabe and munafik, the Malaysian film, and then gibah we have here, gibah, and and the fourth, the upcoming one is the title Kodrat. Yeah, Kodrat is about like an ustad, and Muslim cleric, try to get rid of the jinn. That's one. And the second one is the Korin one, Korin Makmum. So Makmum or Korin, or you know, it's like a jinn or a ghost. So every person has their own companion, you know. It's a mystical companion, and the companion can be bad or good, and so on. So starting with the makmum is people who, you know, who do the prayer at the back. Yeah, we have imam, the leader, and makmum, the follower. So the jinn is praying with the person, and it's becoming trending now. We will have Korin, we will and we have another one, at least 3 or 4 films, yeah. And the third one is pocong films, for the shroud ghost films, because pocong is we discussed about pocong films 2 days ago in Madani. It's specifically about Muslim. If we see pocong, meaning he or she is was a Muslim, because in the shroud, something like that. But this is what I one of my concerns would be the sense of horror, just like the sense of humor, are different in one country to another. It depends on the cultural context. Yeah, in Indonesia, pocong films are very scary, but not in, you know, in the Western or something here, because they just think it's ridiculous, something like that. The thing is related to B movies. In Indonesia, we love, you know, to connect everything with mysticism, you know, something mystical, something supernatural.
Right.
So we here in Indonesia, we don't have much of many of science fiction, but
Mm.
Even superhero films, we will connect it with mystical things, something beyond something magical. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know, because compared to Malaysia, the neighboring country, they have many science fiction or something with science fiction elements. Yeah, like even for example, Bobo Boy or Ipin Upin, they have science fiction elements. But in Indonesia, most of the time we always get back to to the mystical, and that's interesting because I think the one in the new approaches and one in the global movies, there are two articles about Sufi aesthetics or mysticism in global films. Then that's interesting, because last year Madani Film Festival also discussed about what is there any Sufi films, or is there any and could you please elaborate about the Sufi aesthetics or mysticism? That is interesting.
Yeah. So one essay is in the Muslims and Movies, and one essay is in the New Approaches book. In the Muslims and the Movies, Syed Haidar, who's a scholar in Britain, in the UK, he dubs this term Sufi aesthetics when looking at Bollywood films. And so basically what he's trying to argue in this is that there are particular artistic or visual or even sonic techniques through use of music or these kind of things that are rooted in like a vernacular sensibility of what spiritual practice is, right, from a Sufi context. But they're used in a way that's not fixed to actual ritual practice. So in the sense they become like signifiers of just a broader kind of mystical Muslim public, right? That's kind of understood. So he looks at a couple of films, two films that use this kind of Sufi aesthetic, both visually and then through music, but are not actually rooted in any kind of lived religion in a way. So that's one essay, and to me that seems like a useful idea, right? Because I feel like I've seen that as well, right? This kind of like capturing of a kind of idea of mysticism without actually being tied to any type of lived religion in a way. Emily Odell in the New Approaches book looks at Sufism not as a kind of like a neatly defined social or intellectual identity, the way that is sometimes constructed in that way. Instead of that, she looks at it as a kind of like cultural repertoire of practices, symbols, personal dispositions, and then certain kinds of spiritual results, right, in the end, and that these can kind of then be used, picked and selected, and kind of used in film in different ways to signify certain things. And for her, again, depending on the context, because she looks at this kind of global examples, right? So she's looking at films from Southeast Asia, from South Asia, from North Africa, from even like Europe and these kind of things. And so this kind of, we might even use Hader's term, the Sufi aesthetics, for Odell, becomes a kind of symbolic device filmmakers use. And they use it to do things like disrupt dominant social norms or ideas about things like patriarchy or things like classism or things like ableism, or other kind of general social marginalizations. Sufism becomes the kind of way to disrupt the assumptions about how these things work. So she looks through like a whole ton, like dozens of movies, to kind of pull out these threads. But basically, Sufism in these films become this kind of a kind of disruptive signifier, right? They're kind of trying to contest the dominant norms of how life should be. So,
wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
But certainly more to be done on that topic. It sounds like in Indonesian film in particular as well.
Yeah, I think we can,
You got to get some graduate students working on this.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. For those who have questions, in Zoom or in YouTube, please, if you want to ask question to Dr. Christian Peterson, go ahead. Yeah. Any topics related to Muslim and cinema will do. Okay. Any question? I think they are amazed of our conversation.
They're thinking it over. No problem.
Okay. Is there any Mas Haryadi ada? Mas Haryadi biasanya. Oh, he's not here. I invited some scholars, focusing on Islamic issue, Islamic cinema as well, but I don't think he's here. So, we still have time until 9 at the latest. But if you have any question at YouTube or Zoom, please go ahead. Yeah. In the meantime, let's discuss other things.
So maybe I can hop in a little bit more about this kind of where the research is going. So the other thing I'm starting to explore is focused on kind of this idea of like Muslim movie stars, and kind of the reason why I'm kind of titling this project the cinematic lives of Muslims rather than like Muslim films or something like this is because I want to look also at kind of the social context of filmmaking and then film viewing. So in the sense that Muslim movie stars kind of serve as almost like a pivot between these two worlds, in the sense that they are part of what defines a film in a particular way, but then they also in their kind of celebrity life have kind of a certain social power, right, that they can use or they can choose to ignore. So for me, I'm interested in Muslim actors that are again informed by Islam and like are interested in Islamic issues. So I'm much of my work is focused on North America, so I'm looking at somebody named Mahershala Ali, who's an Ahmadi Muslim. He's a Black American actor. He was in Moonlight. He was in Green Book. So many of his most well-known characters are not Muslim, and but he's also in the TV show Rami during the second season, and he plays a Sufi imam actually. But I'm interested in how does then someone like Mahershala Ali put his celebrity to use, right? Now that he's kind of gained a platform, what does he do with that? And a lot of what he does is advocate for the Ahmadi community. He's very much recognizes his kind of spiritual center, rooted as a Muslim. He's very vocal about this. So I'm interested in these kind of social outcomes of being a Muslim movie star. So another person I'm looking at in that kind of context is Riz Ahmed, the British actor who's done a bunch of stuff, but probably his most famous is the recent film Sound of Metal, which won a bunch of awards. But he's also, unlike Mahershala Ali, he has focused a great deal on playing Muslim characters of a wide variety. And then also is very much an active kind of social advocate for justice for Muslims. So he's, talking about the Uyghurs in China. He's talking about
Uyghur.
the Rohingya in South Asia. He's doing advocacy work for like the flooding in Pakistan, for example. So so for me, I'm like interested in kind of the social world around film and filmmaking, and kind of the role that celebrities can do this, and how does Islam inform that kind of broader context rather than just their character or the story or these kind of things too.
So one of them is like a social movement run by the celebrities, right? The social movement, the social change.
Yeah.
Now talking about Muslims, celebrities and jinn. This Saturday morning for those for the participants, there's going to be a Zoom discussion with Miss Marvel scriptwriters and actors, the one who played Kamran. We have Madani Film Festival is collaborating with Disney Indonesia. So please join in on Saturday morning Jakarta time. It is interesting because we are going to explore the what is it to be a Muslim actors in Hollywood or in the US. Okay, and
Eki,
one of
if there's can I ask you a question or
please.
What was the kind of general reception of Miss Marvel in Indonesia? Were people excited about it? Were people interested, or were there critiques?
Yeah, it's a split,
a split, okay.
Okay, because people like me, I'm so excited, because the Muslim representation is not it's not a copy paste or template. It's not the ornament, but part of the story. Particularly the mapping of for example, the Illumi antis or the converts, and then the river, something like that. And then the stolen sandals. It's happening in Indonesia as well. Stolen sandal at the most, something like that.
Wow.
And then so it's not. And then because I've been in the UK for about 5 years, while I was doing my doctoral degree. I know how the feeling about a Muslim immigrant, how to celebrate Eid and so on. So I have a connection to Miss Marvel, to the immigrant, the Muslim immigrant, because in your books, you have also discussed about the British Puerto Rican Muslim and so on, and then the immigrants, and that's interesting because in Madani Film Festival we also include the immigrant issues. In fact, there is a program called Immigrants, but it's more into like a Muslims immigrant, the women workers in working in the Hong Kong or the Middle East, for example. And one of the articles is about Wajda, the Haifa Al-Mansur's films. So our opening film this year is The Perfect Candidate, also by Haifa Al-Mansur. But I think Haifa is one of important female directors coming from Middle East. But I've heard she moved to the US, or have you heard?
I'm pretty sure.
But that's from Wajda to Perfect Candidate, where because it's important for us to put the film as opening, because, and as well as Wajda, because in Indonesia most of the people always think that Arab is Islam and Islam is Arab. They don't differentiate the difference. So it's a joke. For example, when people speak Arabic, some of them just say Amin because they thought it's a prayer or something like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and then and in one event when I was invited at Arab Film Festival in Aceh, people, some people also insist, like, for example, and when the committee screen Captain Abu Raid, a Jordan film, the main character is a young woman, but not wearing hijab, and she is a pilot of then one of the audience said that, oh, this is not Islam, because so this is a French film and so on later, because Islam is Arab and Arab is Islam. So the film Wajda and Perfect Candidate is very important because we can see the the social change in Arab, in Arab Saudi for in particular, because the lady can drive. Now they can drive.
Right. Yeah.
They can drive, and then they don't at home they don't wear hijab, and then one of the most interesting thing is when in Wajda there was a scene, people doing Quranic reading, the competition, right. But the teachers, they don't wear hijab. That's impossible in Indonesia. In Indonesia, ustazah always wear hijab. Then both films were official submission of Saudi Arabia. So that is a proof by the kingdom, right? That's right. Interesting. Yeah. You cannot deny that is not Arab. No, it's an official submission. That's we want to show that. But the thing is, this is not representation. One of the speakers told me, because film cannot be trusted as representation of society. And he said, like, for example, that Hong Kong is one of the cleanest country from the almost no corruption.
Yeah.
But there are some films about corruption being made by Hong Kong filmmakers. So that's not, the reality is not the same with the movies. That's one of the arguments.
Yeah.
So then that's
I think that all like gets to the this kind of like tension of between what I think you and I are doing and what perhaps people who want to define Islam in a much narrower way is, who do we privilege in kind of defining this category? Do we say it's like quote unquote official Islam? Is it religious clerics? Is it text and that's it? Or is it like the everyday lived practice that people do? And I think I like Wajda for that reason. I haven't seen Perfect Candidate, so I don't know about that one. But in Wajda, I use it in classes a lot too, because for American students, they often similarly think like all Muslims are Arabs, all Arabs are Muslims, and they have a kind of very like narrow understanding of like what being a Muslim is. And I think I like Wajda because it does give this kind of broad spectrum that within a given context there's a variety of opinion, there's a variety of interpretation, there's people that push back against whatever the dominant narrative might be or the dominant social norms. There's people that don't agree with them, right, even though they have to live by them, and they might say, how can we contest this? But then also it's great because it does show this kind of everyday participation in religious life through, studying the Quran, reciting the Quran. I think students get a real kick out of like that she's memorizing the Quran basically from like a video game almost. It's kind of like a game show, type of way of learning. So, this I think is really kind of unexpected for a lot of for non-Muslims in America. They kind of assume that, because of the long history of kind of negative representations, that Muslims are all the same and they are very kind of static and legalistic in their understanding and practice, and that they're not they're not like them, right? They don't want to ride a bike as a young girl or something like this.
Yeah.
So I think that film does a really good job of kind of really showing instead of telling, in a way that like there's lots of ways to kind of subvert the kind of stereotypical understanding that many people have about Muslims.
Yeah.
Eki, you never told me about the other perspective on Miss Marvel. You said, right, there's people like you who were excited, but then you never told me you got sidetracked. So what did the other side say?
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, the other side is a Marvel enthusiast, yeah, who thinks that Marvel, who think that they know Marvel more than the creator of Miss Marvel. And one of the and the other thing is there is also one small groups that always question the rituals,
right?
But they, for example, hey, they celebrate it, but they don't do fasting. Yeah. But we in Indonesia, the Idul Fitri is, we celebrate Idul Fitri, in a fancy and better than we celebrate Idul Adha, the second one. Second. But in the US or in the UK, they celebrate Idul Adha more, like a party or something.
Celebration
to celebrate, more. And what happened in Miss Marvel, they celebrate the Idul Adha, the one that don't celebrate after the Ramadan, the fasting month. And there are a lot of, because we are Shafi'i, the Islamic school of thought, Shafi'iyah, but in India and Pakistan, they do the other school of thought. So we have different traditions, different rituals. Like, why is that? Why? So this is a fake, something like this.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to know the fact that the script writers and the directors are Muslims, or they did the research deeper. It's important. I mean, I love Miss Marvel more than Moon Knight, for example. Moon Knight is more about the mythology of Egypt and so on and so on. It's interesting, and some of the script writers or the filmmakers, they did both. They did both. It is interesting that the Disney or Hollywood accommodate more Muslim talents, Muslim scriptwriters, Muslim filmmakers, and Muslim stories as well. In a better manner rather than colonial gaze or something, like to patronize, but they do more fair, because they also include the Muslim perspective into the films. I think compared to, for example, back in the 80s or 90s, like True Lies is one of the case in Indonesia,
well known.
Well known for, because they mocking the speech of, I forget, the one of the Islamic figures when they cross from to the at Andalusia, like they did the one of the Islamic figures, Ziyad bin something, Ziyad or something, and they put the same speech to the True Lies, and they thought that's the, but the True Lies is more into Arab rather than Muslims. But of course, like Indonesia, just like another country, if the state ban a movie, because True Lies was banned, but it's like True Lies was released in the cinema, and then like 5 or 6 days later they banned because so many protests.
Right.
Of course, when we heard about the plan of they want to ban the film, of course we watch the film.
Right. Right. Yeah. It makes you
And
want to watch
okay,
more.
I want to watch more. Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, so it's more friendly. Yeah, you know, in here now, like Miss Marvel,
Yeah.
the reception more is more friendly than what happened in like
Yeah.
a
Sure.
decade or 2 decades ago, and as well as because like, but of course it like you highlight it's not about bad or good anymore, right? Bad Muslim, good
Yeah.
Muslim, but it's beyond that, beyond. So because
Right.
that's why you have a great a chapters, yeah, for it, and you also include the film industry, film workers as well. That's nice, because in Indonesia we have all, there are some people only, halal haram thing, so
Right.
it's quite, and they applied the Islamic law strictly, including into movies,
Yes.
some some film communities, they produce films, but they don't want to screen the films at the cinema, because it's like cinema for them is a dark place to for young girls and boys having fun, something
Right.
like that, like
Yeah.
intimacy or something, something like that. So but in some groups they screen the films at the cinema, but they separate between boys, between woman and just like we do the prayer at the mosque or something.
Sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, the practice, the ritual is interesting. Yeah. How they apply the law, the Sharia. For example, there was a time when a small group of filmmakers, if the actors are not brothers or husband and wife, they cannot holding hands or something like that. But one of the senior filmmakers, like Deddy Miswar, he said that we need a new film language. Yeah. So if you don't want two actors hugging each other, so don't make the move, don't make the script. You need to
Right.
to do like, and like for example, Deddy Miswar, he said that it's very odd, yeah, if hijabi woman still wear hijab at home, yeah, because it's like domestic. But since people watch, they need to to wear off the hijab.
Right.
But like, people like Deddy Miswar, they have the trick, yeah. For example, there is a character, a girl wearing hijab, and then fast asleep, sleeping wearing hijab, and that's logic because it's fast asleep. That's you need to be more creative, said Deddy Miswar, to find a way, something like that. So that's the thing happened in Indonesia through
that kind of same context happens in Iranian cinema as well, right? Because even though you are it's a private space in the sense of being at home, right? In the narrative, it's the whole thing is public, right? So they require the actresses to wear hijab, even in context where they wouldn't, because it's going to be filmed, screened by everybody. So
the thing is, Saudi Arabia films are more relaxed, because at home, like Perfect Candidate or Wajda, the girls or the woman, they don't wear hijab inside their own house, because something that's interesting, because that's Arab Saudi. People consider Arab Saudi as have a strict Islamic law, but that doesn't apply at on screen.
I'm interested to kind of Saudi Arabia as a kind of a new kind of film industry is, I think, going to be really interesting to watch, because there really is not an industry that much yet. It's still like very much in its like kind of infancy. And even these films, Wajda and Perfect Candidate, I mean, the filmmaker is of Saudi heritage, but I think she's like been financing them from the US and Europe, and mainly like looking to those audiences as potential audiences, rather than kind of a more localized kind of film industry developing. But as far as I know, that is happening. There's more and more kind of Saudi creatives. The other thing, I don't know if people have questions that we need to talk about, but something else that seems to be interesting and thinking about, we're not as young as we once were, and we are of a generation where like film is pretty meaningful to us. But it seems like, at least in a US context, like people are moving away from film. They're not interested in film. They are maybe more interested in television, but maybe even like just not interested in either traditional media of television or film, but more interested in, YouTube and TikTok and these kind of more micro media type of contexts.
Yeah.
And so it seems like in Saudi also that has been a space where people have been able to develop things and perhaps work outside of like maybe a more strict industry guidelines or things like this. So yeah, anyway, that all that to say is just like Saudi seems like a really interesting place to like keep an eye on in terms of like film and media. And then also like, yeah, just the kind of changing landscape of like viewership and spectatorship, how that might, it's certainly affecting Hollywood in terms of the types of films that they're willing to make, invest all this money into making, and then they, don't get the return. It has like, shut out a lot of people that would probably make great art. But since the film industry isn't necessarily an art business, it seems like a lot is getting left out. So
Okay. Since there is no question, I would like to ask a final question about. I'm wondering about the next project, the cinematic lives of Muslims. So could you please elaborate a bit, and when it will be published? Yeah.
Sure. Who knows when it'll be published? That's the kind of the long term goal. But life, kids, work, not going, losing my mind, these kind of things all are factors in shaping that where that will be. But it's a lot of what I've been talking about. So it's the project, the way I've conceived that might be kind of like a long-term like project where some of these other things might be focal points. So part of I'm very much interested in like kind of setting out a kind of framework for thinking about Muslim cinema as a category, right? And defining that, and kind of so the cinematic lives of Muslims might be a kind of long-term cross-cultural comparison of like how Muslim cinema might operate. Is it a useful category? If so, what does it help us think about cross-culturally? So I think long-term that would be the goal, right? Kind of lay out this idea of Muslim cinema, look at a variety of Muslim majority contexts where there's a kind of developed film industry, Indonesia, Egypt, Nigeria, Turkey, places like this, right? Plus others. See if that differs for perhaps like independent filmmakers in places like the US or Canada or France or the UK, where that's the kind of space where Muslim cinema is being created. It's not kind of a big budget type of things. But I think that'll probably require some like legwork before that kind of big project comes out. So, you know, I'm kind of tossing around the idea of like, you know, kind of writing a shorter book, almost kind of like a manifesto on Muslim cinema, right? Saying like, this is a useful category, this is what it is, and kind of like just setting out some guidelines to like get a conversation going. And then also very much these Muslim movie stars and the kind of social life of Muslim celebrities. That's very much something I'm interested in. And, you know, I don't know what form that's going to take, but if it's part of another project or if it's its own thing, we'll kind of see. But you know, those are like years down the road. But I'm trying to write for a more kind of general and public audience as I work through these things. So just yesterday, I published an essay on kind of this idea of like, now that there are more Muslim representations out there, how people within the community are kind of contesting if these are what they want. So it's with a New Lines, which is an online kind of magazine. I can't remember what they titled it. My original title was "This Is Not My Representation," and it kind of looks at debates about, you know, things like Miss Marvel, other shows like Rami that have come out, where a lot of people are like very excited about these things, but then a lot of people within the community are saying like, this is not what we want. Like, well, if we want representation, this is not what we want. So now that there are these kind of like a wider archive, you know, how does that get played out and what are the kind of consequences? So I'll continue to do stuff like that, you know, as time goes on, but the other stuff will take a while.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is the end of our discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Christian Peterson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eki.
Yeah,
it's great talking to you.
Yeah, I think we need to have a conference on Muslim and cinema.
I love it. Let's get me out there. Get me out to Jakarta. I'll be there.
Great. Okay. For the participants, Madani Film Festival is still going on until Saturday. For the schedule and other details, please visit madanifilmfestival.id or go to Twitter and Instagram at Madani Film Fest with C. Yeah, and you will find many details and schedule and so on. And Miss Marvel discussion will be on Saturday morning at 9 Jakarta time. And then the discussion, the launching, the book launch of 99 Madani films will be at 11 Saturday on site in Taman Ismail Marzuki. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much, Christian, and good night and good morning in the US.
Great.
Thank you.
Becky. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Ada bumper lagi, panitia? Stereni. Thank you. Ya, terima kasih Pak Arifandi, terima kasih Buso, terima kasih Gaya, terima kasih teman-teman semua yang sudah datang. Terima kasih. Saya live ya, mau ke festival sebelah. Terima kasih.
Roomnya saya N ya Pak?